going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. You know who it is by now,
Jimothy.
So ladies and gents, I thought I would go ahead and make my own tier list, namely so because of a few upcoming events like YCS London, which I will be attending. So if you do go down there, make sure you come and say hello. Now the tiers, tier 1, obviously we know what tier 1 is. Tier 2, decks that are just below tier 1 but you're probably going to see most frequently. Rogue, obviously, as a category for everything else. Casual, which is basically not worth playing at any kind of like competitive event. And then you've got Pay Attention, which is going to focus on a few decks that have a lot of potential. And I will get into that straight away with our first pick, which is ABC. Now we know what ABC does. We know it used to be mixed with Ethereum strategy, but with the new errated AFD, people are kind of like testing out ABC, and I've seen it create some crazy boards, especially with the ability to extend through some very strong field spells like Ethereum Discoliseum, for example, and then be able to summon an extender from hand via Ancient Fairy Dragon, as well as some of the new synchro tools which are going to be coming out shortly. So definitely a deck that you need to pay attention. Whether or not we see in the next like month or so is neither here nor there. It's just for you guys to kind of like have an idea that the deck could be around and it could actually be a thing. Branded, we all know it's a tier 1 deck. I've had this conversation before. I spoke to Fabs most recently, and if you haven't checked out Fabs's YouTube, make sure you go and do that. I will leave a link in the description below. Now Branded is a very powerful deck, but what the conclusion I came to was that Branded beats decks by using its engine, which is good but then bad in the same sense, because you don't have enough space to be able to kind of like tech in cards to address the meta. The space in the deck is so tight, as well as just being blown out by like Ash Blossom or D Barrier, for example. So Branded is a strong deck. It will definitely get some tops if it's allowed to pop off. The boards that it creates are silly. It can put a lot of pressure on. It's got a lot of tools for going into time. Mirror Jade is just a silly card as it is, but I just feel like in of itself it just beats decks using its engine, and that's not always a good place to be, specifically with a number of just like one card blowouts in the meta. But it's definitely a tier 1 deck. BLACKWINGS, I'm going to put in Rogue. Again, very powerful, can put up a nasty board, but with some of the cards that decks are playing nowadays, it's very easy to out. Lava Golem being a very strong staple in the meta, just tributing over a couple of their most or more interactive cards can be a little bit of a blowout, and you tend to go through probably about 60 to 70% of your extra deck on your turn 1 with BLACKWINGS, so it's not really likely you're going to be able to recover from it and affect the game turns 3 and 4 potentially, but yeah. Dragonlink, I'm just going to put it into Pay Attention. Dragonlink is just a strong deck. It's regardless of what meta it's in, it just abuses all the dragon cards in the format. However, it hasn't really seen much experimentation. People aren't really playing it, and I just haven't seen it. So I'm just going to put it into Pay Attention, because at any point, any kind of like minimal support, this deck can just get blown out of proportion, and it can be very powerful. But with Castira in the meta, having no access to some of your graveyard if you go in second can be a bit of a blowout for this deck. So hence why I put it into 1 to watch. Spriggins, I'm going to put in Rogue just because of Gigantic Captain Sargas is just a crazy card. It can do a lot. It's not necessarily going to be taking any major events, but do expect to see it from time to time, ladies and gents. Crystal Beast, I'm just going to put in casual. I do like it, but with the way that the meta is at the moment, I just don't feel like it can compete. It's a little bit too slow for my opinion. In a previous format, potentially yes, because you could play a couple of floodgates, which bought you a couple of turns to actually play. But currently the format is so quick, and there's so many cards that just blow you out. I just feel like it's gone back down to a casual deck. Cyber Dragons, I'm going to put it as casual as always. Heroes, I'm going to put in Rogue. Heroes are an interesting one. The reason why it's interesting is because the Dark Angel lock. Now playing against like any kind of runic variant, Castira, there's just a whole plethora of things that just stop things from happening basically, and having the Dark Angel lock on field is crazy. Not to mention being able to give a Castira player a monster, which kind of hinders their plays a little bit. So definitely interesting. It is rogue at the moment. I feel like if you had a bit more representation and a few more people paid attention to it, it could potentially be higher, but I'm going to leave it at rogue for now. DDD, wow. I'm just going to drop it as casual. Hasn't really done anything. It needs a bit more support. It can't really play in this meta, so I'm going to leave it there. For hire, ladies and gents, wow, I'm going to... Alright. I'm going to put for hire in tier 2. Now, the reason I'm putting it in tier 2, because it plays very similar to Sprites for hire back in the day. So, the whole premise of this deck is to just generate advantage. You can potentially draw upwards of like 5 cards on your opponent's turn, not to mention having all the interaction on your own turn. It can put a monster negate, it's got the runic spells for interaction, it can mill your opponent out, it can put up big beefy monsters if it wants to. It's got the ability to link climb, it can synchro, it can do a lot, ladies and gents. It's got so much interaction, points of interaction should I say. It's a very, very powerful deck. I've seen it played, I've been watching it on like DB Grinder, and just being able to use the runic cards and use the for hire cards to just activate or just access kind of like your deck basically, I think is just crazy. So definitely an interesting deck. The reason I put it in tier 2 is mainly because of the runic cards themselves. Without the runic cards, for hire would strongly be in casual, but runic with for hire it's absolutely crazy, especially being able to draw so many cards. Dragonlink, I'm just gonna put it in casual. I love this deck. It's one of my favorite dragon decks, but it's not doing anything at the moment. Alongside Outlitch, in fact, I'm not gonna put Outlitch in casual. I'll put Outlitch in rogue. Outlitch is a powerful deck, but it's not as powerful as some of the trap decks that we've got currently. It does need a lot of help because the trap decks that play currently are a lot faster, which seems a little bit weird to say, but they're not typically just playing with traps. They've got monsters that can facilitate a couple of basic combos, or just to facilitate getting into their engine, and then once their engine gets rolling, it's a bit of a problem. Whereas Outlitch, I don't think it does that. It kind of plays in its own way, and it's a little bit slow and methodical. You would have to combine it with another engine to be able to get the most out of it, and that's why I'm kind of leaving it as rogue, ladies and gents. So yeah, Outlitch is in rogue. Live Twins, Evil Twins, I'm just going to put it in casual. It needs more support. It can play a number of hand traps, but if it's normal someone gets stuck, you're stuck. Literally stuck. Yes, you've got extenders. The deck is very, very consistent in what it wants to do, but it's just stuck too easily. And then on top of that, if you're playing against Castira, you got no access to the graveyard. Like, what are you really doing, to be honest? So yeah. EXO Sisters, wow, the fall from grace is real. Last format, this deck would have definitely been rogue, potentially even tier 2. Right about now, it is casual. I haven't seen EXO Sisters anywhere, ladies and gents, and I don't think it will, to be honest, mainly because the deck's just not strong enough at the moment. It needs a couple of cards, and I made a video on this previously. 1, maybe 2 more cards, couple of monsters, maybe 1 more spell or trap, and the deck definitely could do something. But at the moment, it hasn't got enough recursion, for my opinion, or for my liking, should I say. Pearly, I'm gonna put in casual. It would go into pay attention, but it just hasn't got the rest of its support, and at the moment, it's just not doing anything, and I don't think it will. Fluunderies, wow, what a fall from grace. I'm gonna put Fluunderies in rogue. Fluunderies is still strong. It still can do a lot of things. It still can play on your turn. It's still got access to certain floodgates. It doesn't necessarily need the barrier statue to win. However, the barrier statue was a very, very strong component of the deck, and I feel like players have not kind of shifted into the new way of playing Fluunderies. They're still kind of hung up on the fact that they used to normal summon the barrier statue. Now that's not a thing no more. I haven't seen too many Fluunderies players experimenting, but I do feel like the deck is still strong. Empen going second is a problem, and just Empen himself is a problem, so definitely a rogue deck. Mech, oh boy, I'm gonna put this in tier 2. The reason I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna find, where's it gone now? There it is. I'm also gonna put Marincess in tier 2. Now the reason I'm putting these two in tier 2 is because the nature of the deck. Now Mech in the previous format just got destroyed by Bestials. It wasn't even funny, and to a certain extent it potentially could even happen this format because it's picking up steam. People are starting noticing Mech. The fact that you can play so far without a normal summon in a Cyberse deck is probably what takes Mech a little bit further, because typically with most Cyberse decks, once they start the normal summon, it's very, very difficult to kind of like facilitate other combos, depending on the type of deck it is. You can still play, obviously, but Mech has a consistent way of doing that, and then its normal summon is something secondary. It can also play into Nibiru and just be fine. It can also play around Nibiru and just be fine, as well as just being able to play so many tech cards, so many hand traps. Yeah, and I think the same goes for Marincess and Mech. I feel like they're kind of like on par with the way that they play. Not very much to get their engine going. Can play loads of hand traps and just basically just disrupt your opponent. So that's why I'm putting these guys in tier 2. It's a bit biased, but I'm rolling with it. Goatee, I'm gonna put it in casual. Hasn't done anything yet. Gishki, I'm gonna put this in the top of tier 2. The reason why is because Gishki Sprite is just crazy. If you've seen any of the boards that this deck can produce, you'll realize how obnoxious this board is. Gishki Nirmanas negating and shuffling away a card is, you don't understand how much impact that can have on the game, along with just the consistency of the Sprite engine and being able to kind of like have so much utility. It does die to Dark Ruler no more, but Dark Ruler no more is not necessarily in the format, so you're free to kind of like just be ignorant of that and just play however you want to. And this deck can do a lot of things. It's not as powerful as it once was with Sprite Alpha missing, but it still can do some crazy boards. I've seen like triple monster negates, as well as an omni negating Toad, as well as a carrot negate. It's actually silly, so definitely something worth being aware of when you go into kind of like any events. Dark World, I'm gonna put in Rogue. Going first, this deck is disgusting. It's probably very, very similar to a couple of FTK strategies. You just won't be able to play. Like, it's actually ridiculous. They'll rip your whole hand. They'll set up like 4 or 5 negates, and you're just not doing anything. Going second, it does have a problem. It needs to access its graveyard. The Dark World monsters themselves don't really do anything by themselves, apart from like Genta. Everything else, you need like dangers or some way to discard them to the graveyard to be able to access their effects. And with Castira being very, very prominent, Macros Cosmos kind of hinders the deck, and if you don't see specific outs, you just can't play. So that's why I'm going to leave Dark Worlds in Rogue. It's seen a few tops. It's a very, very powerful deck. You're kind of playing by yourself, to be honest, but it's just going second is what hinders it, and as well as the Dark World cards themselves inherently being like very bricky. Next we have got Grandmarju. I'm just going to put it in casual. In fact, no, I'm going to put it in casual. I'm going to put it in Rogue. It can still do a few things. It can OTK out of nowhere. It's just not as consistent as I would like it to be, as well as being able to play into boards. One thing I like about this deck, it doesn't really care about where its cards go. Ideally, it wants its cards banished, and it can just normal summon Grandmarju and punch. But with Castira Rise Heart, and with so much removal in the format, infinite impermanence is everywhere, the chances of you just normal summoning this and punching over a monster are going to be very, very low. So I know it's not its only strategy. It likes to focus on a few rank 8s, but I just feel like it's a very difficult game plan to implement with so much interaction on the field. Ninjas, I'm going to put in Rogue. Ninjas have a really, really, really good Castira matchup, as well as some good matchup against a majority of other decks, but struggles against Branded, and Branded is everywhere. It does have some quirky gimmicks, like Yugioh is just stupid, the Trap is stupid, Book of Eclipse is a crazy card, Book of Moon is a crazy card, being able to play on your opponent's turn is just silly. OTKing out of nowhere is just crazy, but it does struggle with fusion decks, and fusion decks unfortunately are in the format, which is why I'd say fits into Rogue. It could potentially be tier 2 with a little bit more testing and a little bit more speculation, but at the moment I feel like it's Rogue. Generators, I'm gonna put it into pay attention. I've been messing about with generators recently. I would say they're a definite Rogue contender. I wouldn't say they're casual. They're a little bit stronger than that, in my opinion. But the points of interaction are too obvious remove the field spell, you remove like the main gimmick of the deck, which is a little bit of a problem. However, you still can play around that, and the consistency of the deck is crazy, along with being able to access like a Baron, a Pop. It can do a lot, but it's just the field spell is like the linchpin of the deck, and if you remove that, you kind of like just remove the deck. So in that instance, I'm putting it into pay attention because it does have room to mix with a few other engines, which is why I'm saying putting it in pay attention. There's a lot that can be done with this deck, and it just hasn't really been experimented with. So yeah, definitely one to watch. Castira, oops. We all know what Castira is, ladies and gents. Probably a little bit stronger than Branded. Let me move Branded back out of the way. Yeah, it's, you know what it does, ladies and gents, like Macrocosmos, just blocking out zones. Although the zone locking is not its game plan anymore, players have adapted a little bit. They do not want to play into Nibiru, which is in the format, so you'll often see like Castira players just end on like a Rise Heart and a couple of back row, and then hope to kind of like recover or just put up a little bit of a presence and hope the Macros Cosmos is enough to just slow your opponent down. Diablosis is a problem. If they do go for the Diablosis line, they're definitely going to have access to knowledge of your deck just by looking at your extra deck, which is what makes this deck highly unfair, because then you can kind of like alter your strategy to just do certain things. So definitely the deck to beat at the moment. So if you go into any kind of event, you're going to be looking to play Castira at some stage, especially in like the later rounds. So definitely be aware of it, ladies and gents. Labyrinth, again, probably the best trap deck in the format. Where is the other one actually? Let me just find it for you. This one, as well as, I'm gonna put it quite high. Trap tricks. So Labyrinth is crazy. Labyrinth just has access to all of the very, very unfair cards that are in the format. D-Barrier, Eradicate Air Epidemic Virus. Just like, it's silly what this deck can search, and it's like I was saying previously, it gets its engine rolling through its monster effects, and just being able to snowball and out advantage your opponent is very, very easy, hence why it's a little bit faster than Outlitch. Trap Tricks is a bit of a unique one. It's got a very, very good Castira matchup just because of Floodgate Trap Hole, but I just feel like in terms of its engine, I feel like Labyrinth is just that tiny bit stronger. Do not get me wrong though, Trap Tricks is a crazy deck, and I know I'm putting it in tier 2 now, but I'm thinking if I do go to the obviously YCS London, I'm gonna try and have a look around, and I feel like I'm gonna see a lot of Trap Tricks players just because the structure deck was just so insane, ladies and gents, and that's probably a topic for another video. Structure decks are just crazy at the moment. They're just, after having a few bad ones, we're actually getting some good ones, so definitely interesting right there. But Trap Tricks definitely a tier 2. Draco Slayers, I'm gonna put it in Rogue. Yeah, we know how that is. As well as a Dolce. Have I put 2? I've got 2 Math Mech here. I don't know why I've done that. Mechanco, I'm gonna put it in pay attention. It can mix with a few other strategies. It's got its quirks, but at the moment I haven't seen enough of it to kind of like definitively put it somewhere. So I'm just gonna put it in pay attention. It's probably classed as Rogue, but could definitely be in a little bit of a higher tier just with some testing. Naturia, I'm gonna put it in tier 2, and when I'm saying Naturia Runic to be specific. It is a horrible deck. It can deck you out, to be honest, but the only thing that I worry about with Naturia is it doesn't always have access to its battle phase, and the monsters that it puts out are super squishy. I'm talking about the Naturia monsters specifically. Any of the synchro monsters that he puts out, in addition to that, obviously they're gonna have their own like quirks and advantages and disadvantages, but Naturia itself just isn't strong enough. But the Runic cards, oh boy, like Runic is crazy. Like, it's silly what that deck can do. When it's mixed with another engine by itself, it's strong, but I feel like Runic plays better when it's mixed with another engine, and Naturia definitely takes advantage of that, and expect to see that somewhere along the line if you're playing in a more upscale tournament. Umi Control, casual. I don't know why I left that on there. Plunder Patrol, I'm going to put that in pay attention. One of my favourite decks in the game, if not my favourite deck, just without a shadow of a doubt. The reason I love this deck is because it can just snowball out of control. It puts up big beefy monsters, and it can play the mid-range game, which is something that I really, really do value in decks. I've put it in pay attention. It probably could be somewhere around here in Rogue, but with the Brave engine, I don't think it's seen much success recently, but that doesn't mean to say it won't do. And I do feel like with the Brave engine, just being able to have that additional negate as well as put up some kind of like present, it's crazy. As well as Plunder Patrol ship Yugioh. Obviously Castira is probably the strongest deck at the moment, but Plunder Patrol ship Yugioh can actually put a token on your opponent's field, and I've actually done this myself at locals. I've put a token on their field, flipped rivalry and said, what are you going to do now? And I've just seen my Castira player or Castira opponent just scoop up his cards and go, well, obviously we're going this game too. So definitely something to watch. Yeah, hasn't done anything yet, but definitely something that you need to pay attention to, and you might actually see this in the lower rounds or the initial rounds of like a bigger tournament. I've got Dragonlink on here twice, I don't know why. Runic, this is pure Runic. I'm gonna put it in Rogue. It's very, very strong, but like I mentioned earlier, it's better when it's paired with another engine. Salamangreat, I'm also gonna put it in Rogue. It's just not as strong as like Mech and Marincess. It does have a nice mid-range game, but it will just get outpaced, and it doesn't do what the other two do as successfully. It doesn't combo off one card like the other cards can, and like I said, if its normal summon gets stopped, it's in a bit of a precarious position, whereas Mech, for example, plays without its normal summon initially anyway, just because Circular is just a stupid card anyway. Scareclaw, again, I feel like Scareclaw and Plunder Patrol are initially the same thing. Both utilize the Brave engine, both have got their own little quirks, can OTK very quickly, but just hasn't seen enough for me to kind of like warranty a place. It probably would be around here somewhere in Rogue, but it's just something that you might need to pay attention to. Scareclaw Castira is definitely a deck and something that you could potentially see, so just keep that in mind, ladies and gents. Brigade, it's definitely Rogue at the moment. I haven't seen anybody playing it. I was gonna take it to locals myself, but I'm basically fearing Castira. You need access to your graveyard, and Castira know this. So D-Shifter, Castira Rise Heart, it's just gonna be stopping you, and I think that's why some people have shied away from it, just because Macros Cosmos, aka D-Shifter, aka no access to your graveyard, is in the format, so it's difficult to play these decks that are very, very graveyard reliant. So yeah, something to just bear in mind, ladies and gents. Sky Striker Rogue, it's powerful, don't get me wrong, ladies and gents. The spells that it can utilize now, especially with like triple tactics tasking, as well as triple tactics talent, as well as all the other cards that it has access to in its arsenal, is crazy. Like, it has a generally good matchup against all of the other Rogue decks. In fact, I'm just gonna put it towards the top of Rogue, to be honest, and I'm gonna move Brigade to the top of Rogue as well, because I feel like these decks, let me move this down, what's this here, I feel like Sky Striker and Brigade have a little bit more than the other Rogue decks at the moment, but they're just not quite tier 2 yet, and I feel like that's more to do with like representation. Sprite, I am definitely putting that in low tier 1. I'm gonna, in fact, no, I'm not. I'm gonna put it below Gishki Sprite. I feel like Gishki Sprite is better than like Nimble Sprite, mainly because Gishki Sprite has like just hard negates and shuffle away, which I just think is crazy. Nimble Sprite has a lot of points of interaction, but I just don't feel it's as strong as like the Gishki Sprite variant, and the monsters are a little bit squishy and they can be removed. Totally Awesome is definitely a card, but then you can just make that in Gishki Sprite anyway. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Sword Soul, again, I'm gonna put this in tier 2, and it's interesting, this tier 2, because a lot of the decks that are in here can be quite easily interchangeable. I feel like the Cyburst decks are probably at the bottom, but all the other decks are somewhere around the top. I feel like the Gishki Sprite variant, in my opinion, is a little bit stronger than most of the decks. Sword Soul is just a solid deck, ladies and gents. Like, there's nothing much else to say about it. It's budget, it clears boards, it can blind second if you want it to, it's got removal, it can put up somewhat of an oppressive board, it can very, very easily kill you in time, especially with Long Yon Burn, as well as Quicksing Sinister Long Yon, but it's just not as strong as the tier 1 deck. So definitely something that you need to watch, and you would definitely see that in any kind of like upscale event that you go to. Rika, I'm gonna put it in Rogue. I want this deck to be good, but the bottom line is it's just not good right now. I feel like if we have some more plant support, it could get better. And by Rika, I mean Rika Sun Avalon. Just with a little bit of plant support, it could be a little bit better, but at the moment, it just... Con is a crazy card, but players know how to play around it. It dies to a few cards that are in the format, most notably evenly matched. Like, it doesn't put much in the way of spell and trap negate, and that's only if you're going to be playing the Sun Avalon trap. I can't remember its name off the top of my head, but unless you're playing that trap, you're dying to evenly match, and it's not even a joke. So hence why I'm putting it in Rogue. Tierlist, wow, what a fall from grace. What a fall from grace. Tierlist is still a strong deck. It still can do a lot of unfair things. The consistency of it is what it's hindering. Well, what's hindering the deck basically. I've seen a few lists. It's looking to play King of the Swamp, but it just doesn't do enough at the moment. I feel like with a bit more experimentation, it might do, but just because of the consistency of the deck, like, why would you want to just risk playing a deck that's not consistent when you could just play Castira, or you could just play Branded, or you could just play Labyrinth? And I feel like you're trying to make this deck work, and it's just not working at the moment. So it could do, maybe I'm wrong, maybe a bit more, I don't know, somebody else with a little bit more nuance of the deck could kind of like build it and just do something with it. Hopefully we see it come back in some kind of way, shape or form, but at the moment I just feel like it needs a lot more testing. In fact, I'm gonna put it in one to watch, just because I feel like it could just come out of the woodwork and just do something crazy. Thunder Dragons slash chaos stuff, I'm just gonna put it in Rogue. Yeah, nothing needs to be said about that. Along with dinosaurs, the new dinosaur support that's coming out is crazy, but it's not here yet. So for that reason, dinos are a strong Rogue contender. Nothing more, nothing less. Virtual World Rogue, powerful, can add back face down banished cards, but it loses to itself half the time. Not to mention all the other things that are in the format. So yeah. Punk have been doing some crazy things, like the synchro stuff. In fact, I'm going to put Punk towards the top, to be honest. And I'm going to drop Outlitch, the Golden Lord, back down here somewhere. I think he's towards the bottom, to be honest. Maybe about here. But yeah, Punk have been doing some silly things, like Gold Pride Punk looks like an interesting archetype. Or, sorry, an interesting deck with the couple of engines. Punk are a solid deck. You probably will see some kind of Punk engine in some of the decks that you're going to be playing against. But again, it's just not... I feel like the Macros Cosmos effect kills it. And I know I tend to look at decks with the ability to go second, just because if you lose Dyro, which I always do, what is your deck doing against the meta? And Punk kind of struggles by itself. Mixing it with another engine, it could potentially do something. But at the moment, I feel like independently, it just can't quite cut it. Well, that is it, ladies and gents. So what do you think? Is there anything that I've missed off here? I feel like the format is well defined in terms of the tier 1 deck, but what interests me the most is the fact that we've got all this tier 2 deck and all of these rogue options now available, whereas previously it was literally just tier elements and maybe Fluendaries. But now we've got a lot of things that you could be running into if you attend any kind of like major event. So definitely something to keep an eye out, ladies and gents. But what do you think? Is there anything that could have been changed? If so, get at me in that comment section below. And as always, we found ourselves at the end of another video. If you do like this content, you know what to do by now. Hit that like button, share, subscribe, all of that beautiful good stuff. And I will definitely see you guys on the next video. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.